For the past month, Elon Musk's DOGE program has been the trick-or-treater from hell. Except instead of asking for candy, it's gone door-to-door in D.C., taking back wasted taxpayer money. One of the biggest wastes of our taxes is the ATF, and they're shuttered up in their home with the lights off, hoping they don't hear a knock. Now, over the past decade, Congress has allowed the ATF to guzzle down billions after billions in federal dollars. In 2020, the ATF was operating with a $1.4 billion budget, and just 3 years later, that number was $1.73 billion. And it's because of these numbers that ever since the announcement of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, everyone here at NAGR has been crossing our fingers, praying for the axe to fall. The fact that a bureaucracy as unconstitutional and corrupt as the ATF has lasted this long is a huge spit in the face to the beliefs this country has been founded upon. But they've been backed into a corner. They know that the reign of gun grabbers is coming to an end. Shortly before his recent resignation, disgraced ATF Director Steve Dettelbach appeared scared when talking about the incoming administration.
Dettelbach, who expects to leave his post when Donald Trump is inaugurated, warns that this agency is a prime target for major reductions.
Seeing Dettelbach that worried is very satisfying, especially after he gave gun owners one final middle finger when his colleagues gave him an 80% lower as a parting gift. That's the very item he launched a crusade against. But as of last week, Trump made Kash Patel, head of the FBI, the acting director for the ATF. Now, this is a huge step in the right direction, especially when considering the swamp creature that was in the position only a week ago. This is Marvin Richardson, who was already the ATF acting director from 21 till 2022, and he's been involved in the Bureau since before Waco happened. And here he is bragging about how under his leadership, the ATF was able to wiggle their way around statutes and apply their own regulations.
And so we have been limited by the language in the statutes. Well, here just recently, over the last year, we overhauled those two statutes. That was no small feat, because literally when you talk about changing it, we had to do it through a regulatory process, not a statutory process, because we couldn't change the language of the statute, but we could redefine the terminology that's in the statute to make it fit today's standards.
Though Kash Patel, as the acting ATF director, brings a lot of hope to gun owners, the ATF's existence alone is not in the best interest of the U.S. Constitution or our gun owners. That is why the best way to disarm the disarmers is by going after their bank account. And that's where DOGE comes into the picture. Today, I'm going to answer two questions. Can DOGE defund the ATF, and how can they do it? Before I get into today's video, I want to remind you that we are at a turning point for our rights, and you have the chance to help us. You can do that by clicking the link in the description and signing our petition urging Congress and President Trump to enact pro-gun legislation and avoid all infringement on our rights. So, can DOGE defund the ATF? Even though it's been a whole month now since the inauguration and we've yet to see any budget changes to the ATF, it's just a matter of time before their piggy bank is under attack in one form or another. Defunding the ATF will be no easy feat. And the sooner the better, but DOGE's first priorities have been to stop the wasting of taxpayer dollars on low-hanging fruit like a rocky Sesame Street and drag queen shows in Ecuador. And yes, those are real uses of our hard-earned money. Now, the White House has targeted other taxpayer-funded gun control, like throwing out Joe Biden's Office of Gun Violence Prevention. But there are fundamental differences between a government entity established by an executive order and one established by law. Funding-wise, the ATF's budget needs to be approved by Congress, while the Office of Gun Violence Prevention was run on generic appropriation funds bestowed to the White House. It's easy for the current White House to remove government entities established by the previous president, but the ATF's existence has been solidified by one of the most infamous gun bans in America, the Gun Control Act of 1968. The thing is, the GCA's text created the ATF, under a different name at the time, as a taxing authority, not law enforcement. It wasn't until 1972 that the Department of Treasury spun it off to become its own bureau. If this were still the situation, then the current Treasury could technically abolish the ATF, taking on its responsibilities and simply underfund those duties. The issue is the ATF was reclassified as a law enforcement agency by Congress in 2003 with the Homeland Security Act. The ATF's validity as an organization has sadly been locked into place for decades, blocking DOGE from directly cutting their budget. With that in mind, DOGE and the White House can still put policies in place to render the ATF paralyzed. Trump is on the verge of this already with his 10-to-1 deregulation initiative that states, quotes, "The order requires that whenever an agency promulgates a new rule, regulation, or guidance, it must identify at least 10 existing rules, regulations, or guidance documents to be repealed." 10-to-1. This isn't being enforced just yet, and the ATF will certainly bring some resistance, like they did with Trump's 2-to-1 rule in his first term. But if Trump can follow through on this, anytime the ATF wants to put new restrictions on our rights, they have to put 10 of their old rules on the chopping block. With this bombshell, there isn't much for the ATF to do, but Trump can take it further. For fiscal year 2026, the ATF requested a budget of $1.95 billion from Congress. If Trump's final pick for director actually believes in the Second Amendment, then the first thing he'll do when he's confirmed is lower that request to whatever the demolition cost for the ATF HQ would be, effectively doing away with the agency as a whole. We can always dream. Let's say we can't get a good nominee passed through the Senate. Well, the DOJ has a lot of potential to inhibit the ATF. Pam Bondi has already dealt a pretty significant blow to the ATF, albeit temporary. The DOJ issued a memorandum that shifted ATF resources to help with more pressing issues. What this did in practice was temporarily transfer most of the law enforcement agents at the ATF to help with the border crisis. The ATF's regulatory duties, like reviewing firearms licenses and background checks, remains untouched. But this puts a huge bottleneck on the never-ending raids that have left many with damaged homes and funerals to pay for. I wish this administration happened sooner and people like Brian Malinowski and Mark Manley were never targeted in the first place. But things are looking up now. This administration, whether through DOGE or the Department of Justice, has been swiftly demonstrating its commitment to protecting his Second Amendment rights. While it's uncertain if DOGE could directly influence the ATF's budget, they'll likely support the broad administration's efforts to reduce the ATF's funding and certainly the scope of their authority. Now, we'll be doing our part too, pushing forward in the courts and Congress. So go ahead and click the link in the description and comments below to sign that petition. And consider joining our newsletter so you can stay informed on more 2A fights. Thank you for watching.